I'd like to reiterate, we respect, love and value the emotional and physical safety of all LGBT plus people of colour, including those who are part of the Muslim community. There will be no tolerance of any aggression, intimidation, physical or emotional attack on anyone on the stage or in the audience at Black Pride. Any behaviour deemed threatening must be reported to security immediately. If you are behaving in a manner that is causing emotional distress to anyone in this space, you'll be asked to leave. So it's really important that we all respect each other and value the fact that we're all contributing to something which is really important to our community. Now, I'm very honoured to have the panellists we have here to our right. To my right is Andrew Moffat, and Andy is the assistant head teacher at Parkfield Community School in Birmingham and the creator of the No Outsiders in Our School resource. And the aim is to teach young children to recognise and accept diversity in preparation for life in modern Britain. In 2017, Andy was awarded an MBE for his quality and diversity work in education, and in 2019 he's one of the top 10 finalists in the Varkey Foundation Global Teacher Prize. And I also had the honour of seeing Andy last Friday, where he picked up an Attitude Magazine award. So that's Andy Moffat. Saima Razzaq is there to Andy's right. Saima is the first Muslim woman to lead a Pride parade in Britain, Birmingham Pride earlier this year. Sorry, apologise, Saima. She's co-chair of SEED, supporting the education of equality and diversity in schools, a campaigning group set up in light of the recent protests in Birmingham. Since formation, SEED has worked hard to ensure protests didn't escalate into a war between LGBTQI community and the Muslim community. To her right is Ferhan Khan. Ferhan is a queer Muslim activist campaigning to promote greater visibility of LGBTQ plus Muslims, to put an end to the days when Muslim communities of Britain can say we don't have LGBTQ plus people in our communities. Okay, well, first question, Andy, to you is that when you designed the No Outsiders program, did you ever envisage it have such an impact in our queer LGBT plus Muslim communities?
Hi everyone, it's great to be here. Thank you for having me. So no, I had no idea it'd be like this. No Outsiders has been going to our school for 4 years. 4 years of just fantastic work with no complaint at all. So it's been a shock, in January when it all kicked off. But I think, what it shows is the need for this work. That's what the protests show, and we carry on.
Well, I mean, Ferhan, as a queer Muslim who's living in Birmingham, who grew up in Birmingham, grew up in the Midlands, how did you feel grew up in Britain, how did you find the impact in relation to seeing what was going on, what the protests and everything?
I'm no from Birmingham, so can you not tell? I'm from Glasgow. So sorry, your question was, how does it feel as a queer Muslim growing up in Britain?
Yes.
And well, I must admit, part of my work is being uncompromising about both of my identities as an LGBTQ person and a Muslim as well, because I feel that both those identities, there's a pressure to curtail both of those identities uniquely as well. So, really, we're in a very interesting position actually. Now, the way that our identities were erased and, is erased still currently, is that the Muslim community will say that we simply do not exist. They will say, well, we don't have any queer Muslims, we don't have any LGBT Muslims, there's nothing to see here, move along. Well, actually, that's not true, obviously. Now, what there has always been a pressure to do as queer Muslims is to be quiet, in order not to upset anyone. And ultimately, also now that we live in a post-9/11 world, white people will, kind of like make us feel so we have to curtail our Muslimness in a certain sense as well. And so, by being Muslim, we have something to explain as to why there is such a, so much coming out of the, so much hatred and stuff coming out of the Muslim world.
So what is the message we need to send? What's the message to the queer Muslim community?
So the queer Muslim community, we, so if it's safe for you to do so, try to be visible, but obviously it's not really as easy and simple as that. So really it's a case of love yourself. If you are a queer Muslim, love yourself. Let go of the shame that has been placed upon you, the toxic shame that tells you that there's something wrong with who you are, there's something wrong with you for loving who you love, there's something wrong with you for identifying in the gender that you identify with that's maybe different to how you were assigned at birth. It's about self-love, and find self-care, find ways to care for yourself, because you need it.
And Saima, what's your message? What do you think the message should be to the queer Muslim community?
Well, for me, I'm somebody who has never really been defined by any labels. So, I've never really said, oh, I'm Pakistani, I'm Muslim, I'm gay, whatever. I've just bumbled through life. I am who I am. But seeing what Andrew's experienced in Birmingham really struck a chord with me. And I'm from the same community that are protesting. And it's not everyone who's protesting, by the way. And I must also say, the media and journalists must be accountable. They're demonising my entire community at the moment. And yes, okay, there is an inherent homophobia within our communities, but this didn't start with Muslims. It actually started with a Christian group who started on you back in 2014 when Andrew tried to bring out a program called Chips, which tackled homophobia. And then now Andrew's brought out No Outsiders, which tackles equality across the board. But the only reason Andrew is being attacked is because he's gay and people think he has an agenda. So one of the reasons I decided to get all the Muslims I knew, all the queer Muslims, all our allies together in Birmingham, was to show a message of unity and to show we exist. We have to have these conversations with our families. So if I use my mum as an example, so considering I'm somebody who hates this concept of coming out, because why should we have to say we're different for heterosexual people? We are who we are. But anyway, that regardless, I ended up coming out on BBC Breakfast. I thought it was just going to be a local thing, so I went to bed, did the interview. I did it out of frustration though, and I woke up the next day to 1 million Twitter notifications. It was on breakfast, and I had to send it to my mum because I didn't want her to see it from anyone else. So I sent it on WhatsApp, didn't hear anything back, and then I asked her the question, and she said, "Oh my God, you said it." And I said, "What? I'm gay?" And I've been part of a few identity photography exhibitions, so for me, my sexuality was already out there. Then it went to, okay, I get the campaigning, I'm with you, no more TV interviews. I was like, all right, Mum, I'm going to carry on, but fine. And then it got to now where when I'm leaving the house, my brother says to me, oh, are you going to be on TV today? Very positively. So the point is we have to have these conversations with our families, and we are who we are. I'm very privileged for my family to have accepted me. There will be family members who don't, but I'm happy to have that conversation with them, and we've got to take the debate. But you've got to be proud of who you are, and the most important thing is nobody needs to, they've got the choice, anybody can leave their faith, but nobody should be made to leave their community, their faith or their family behind simply to be who they are. And this boils down to catastrophic disasters in mental health of young people, which leads to suicide, which I see time and time again. And that's what it boils down to. So you just got to be loud and proud if you can, and if you can't, there's people like me now. Come and join us, and I'm part of an organisation called Seeds. We'll talk about that later.
What's currently happening in Birmingham in your schools, and how can we assist you as a community?
Okay, so what's currently happening is, so No Outsiders has been running, as you know, and in January there were protests because some people were getting confused about No Outsiders being sex education, and it never has been sex education. Just because you talk about LGBT doesn't make it sex education. And you'll have seen on the news protests were started, and so out of respect for the community, we paused No Outsiders at our school to re-engage. Now, and so we have been engaging with our parents for the last 5 months, and in the last couple of weeks we have come to a well, I've rewritten some of the resources, and now we move forward. Look, I mean, it's difficult, and it's hard to talk about because actually, you know, I need to respect the community and the parents that I'm with, so I don't really want to talk about it too much. What I would say is it's difficult currently, but I'm confident that there are many parents that support this work, and they really are. And it's about working brick by brick, stone by stone, to bring people with us. I can't do this work without the support of parents in my school, and I've always been clear about that, and that's why I wrote No Outsiders actually. I had a bad experience in my previous school where I didn't work with parents. That was with the CHIPS resource, and what I learned from that is, number one, you teach LGBT in context. You don't have like black lesson, Jewish lesson, gay lesson, disability lesson. You have equality lessons where you talk about all the ways that we are different. And number two, you engage parents from the start, you know, and you bring parents on board with you, and that's what we did. So that's so important that I do this work with the support of parents. And if they're not supportive, well, we'll work together and we'll find common ground and we'll do it.
One thing to remember, if you guys are not that familiar with Birmingham, the communities we're dealing with are some of, if not the most deprived communities in Birmingham. So the parents of kids in your school, for example, in Anderton Park, their only worry is putting food on the table. And what's happening now is there is a slight far-right agenda in terms of faith far-right. And what they're doing is misfeeding false information, and there's a lot of hearsay that's been bandied around. We've seen weird images downloaded from the internet that aren't even in any of the books, clip art images that they're banding out outside the school, saying this school has paedophiles, this school has abusers, etc., etc. So there's a lot of lies, and it's only, you know, it's very difficult for Andrew, because when these communities look at Andrew, you know, they'll see a white man. It's like, well, why are you telling us what to do? What do you know? So I think it's really now, unfortunately, down to people like me who need to start having those difficult conversations. I've been having conversations with parents for a while now, and I'm stuck in the middle. The LGBTQI community are racist, and then the Muslim community don't want me. Where am I supposed to go? When I have children, where are they going to go? And I think that's the narrative we need to talk about, because there is a lot of hearsay. And I think with the education and with continued conversation is the only way we're going to win it. But unfortunately for Andrew, he's already going to lose. He's a white gay man, and they seem to think he doesn't have any agenda, but they seem to think he's got this gay agenda that they're pushing on their children. So it needs more people like myself and Ferhan and Khakan to actually have these difficult conversations now, because they can relate to us, and hopefully we can educate them. It's not going to happen overnight though.
Can I actually just mention, just leading straight onto that, I'm a diversity role model as well. So I work with the charity Diversity Role Models, where we go in and we tackle HBT bullying, that's homophobic, biphobic and transphobic bullying. And Diversity Role Models was set up by the parents of a child who unfortunately committed suicide. There was speculation that he was gay, but it was never confirmed by himself. But because of the bullying that he received, he decided, sadly, to take his own life. So the parents set up this charity. Now, this 2019, there's been a drive by the charity to take Muslims, queer Muslims like myself, to go into schools in East London, for example. One of them was where Shamima Begum actually went to school, Mulberry Academy, and it's important to speak to these children at secondary school level is where I go, but I think it's more important to go in even earlier at primary school, because at primary school they do still start to have these conversations, and there is homophobic bullying, biphobic bullying and transphobic bullying at primary school. So really what we're focusing on is bullying. Nobody should feel as though it's legitimate to bully someone that's LGBT. That idea needs to be completely taken out of context and taken out of the picture. So so the charity appreciates it's my voice as an LGBT Muslim to actually speak to these children, and yes, the children do respond quite well. I open up my speech with Assalamu alaikum, right? And that means, it's Arabic for peace be upon you. So when we say Islam is a religion of peace, it is. Literally every time we greet each other, it's wishing peace. In Christianity, in Austria, for example, you say Groß Gott, which means God is great. But we don't say that as Muslims. We say peace be upon you, Assalamu alaikum. And the kids love it. Sorry.
I'd like to introduce Khakan Qureshi has joined us also on the panel. Now, Khakan, you founded Birmingham South Asian LGBT+. You're on the Interfaith Advisory Panel. I mean, what's your view and insight in relation to how the No Outsiders programme has impacted the faith LGBTQ communities?
Hello, sorry, I apologise for being late. But first of all, I just want to say that I think we forget that when we talk about being LGBT, we forget how it impacts on mental health of the individual, especially when they're coming out as well. I know from my own personal experience and talking to other people that it impacts to the point where you feel suicidal or you contemplate suicide and you have all these negative thoughts and you have nowhere to turn to. From my own personal experience, it was all about religious guilt, because we're told from a very, very young age that being homosexual is haram or forbidden or a sin, and this is how these protests have highlighted that within the community. There's a number of people who are coming through to my group and saying that, you know, the protesters, they need to be understanding that it's been quite detrimental to the children, because we do know out of 600 children, there's bound to be half a dozen who identify or will be questioning their sexual orientation and gender identity. So within my group as well, people are sort of backing away from the group, they're backing away from the protests, and it's almost as if they're retreating back into the closet. And it's a great shame, really, because we've making so many strides forward, and with the group in particular, it's been 5 years running. But at this rate, you know, I feel that I need to disband the group because people are backing off, and they're saying that the community is so much against the LGBT that they can't handle it anymore. But what I have to do, and the rest of the panel, is continually challenge that narrative and the negative rhetoric. It's quite difficult all the time, because when we speak up, we're told that we're too westernised. So when we say that we're not westernised, we do adhere to principles of our faith, our heritage, and we're very proud of our heritage. But at the same time, we have to say that we're living in the UK and we need to be able to balance it out. The sad thing about it for me is that a number of the protesters, they're born and bred here in the UK, and so somewhere along the line I keep thinking that the education system is either failing or the traditions and cultures that they're growing up in is so strong that we can't break it. And for a number of years I've been saying that same-sex legislation, although I applaud it and I appreciate it a lot, it's not transferring very well to the BAME communities. And we've been talking about that for a number of years, and it just so happens that the protest has highlighted that. So for me, the silver lining I take is that at least the conversation is happening, whether it's negative or positive, the conversation is happening, and that's something that I have to agree with.
Okay. Well, I mean, seeing the protests now moving to other cities, for example, you know, Newham in London and Manchester. Ferhan, I mean, what steps can you take to try and safeguard and protect our well-being?
Absolutely. So first of all, I just want to quickly pick up on a point that you made, that because we live, there's this idea that because we live in Britain, suddenly we have to be, you know, gay friendly and things like that. Well, actually, I would refute that. I think that there are more Muslims, for example, living in India than in Pakistan, and you know, they have decriminalized homosexual acts, you know, and you know, these protesters would be so surprised by how much progress has been made in the Indian subcontinent. Attitudes have shifted. You know, the issue in this country is that as diaspora communities, our feelings, our values are entrenched, and they actually don't evolve because we're like worried about, you know, being westernized and things like that. We have to get rid of that thinking, actually, and we had to look back at the homeland. And actually, funnily enough, in the homeland, it was the British Empire that imposed homophobic laws onto us under 377, Section 377, as Scotsman's Lord Macaulay brought in the penal code that criminalised homosexuality. That subcontinent was queer as F before, do you know what I mean? And the Brits were actually, the Victorian British social mores were the ones that were, imposing their homophobia onto us, actually. Now, talking about the rest of the UK, I come from Scotland. The conversation going on in Scotland is zero right now. I have a friend who is in a charity that we're both affiliated with, Hidayah LGBT+. Now, our representative, unfortunately, in Glasgow, in Scotland, can't even be seen with me because I'm too out there, you know? It's I come from a Glaswegian community. It was so stifling that I had to leave and live in Britain to live my queer life. And I'm so glad that I did, because if I'd stayed in Glasgow, I would have actually been too afraid to come out, because, you know, across the country, the homophobia is much more marked in the communities, in diaspora communities around the UK. So there's a danger that these protests going on in Birmingham could spread to other cities, which is why we need to start being vocal about this as early as possible to show that this is not acceptable, actually, and that we're, as queer Muslims, LGBTQ Muslims, are not simply going to watch and go, you know, oh, this is bad, let's silence ourselves and go back into the closet. We're going to say, do you know what? No, it's time for you to start changing your minds. Unfortunately, we love you, and we are you. We're part of you, but we need to start opening up these discussions. And it's not just LGBTQ. We need to talk about misogyny. We need to talk about consent. We need to talk about the fact that there's quite a lot of childhood sexual abuse that happens undercover in these, back home in the homeland. Unfortunately, I know it's not a popular thing to talk about, but these conversations aren't happening in our South Asian community. We need to start having them. Let's not be too shook to have these conversations.
Well, talking about these conversations, Khakan, what steps do you think we as a community can take to safeguard our well-being, especially when we have our right to our identity and our intersectionality?
I think what we need to be having is I personally feel that we need to be much more creative. I know there's a number of people in the community who have been asking for counter protests. I don't think that's beneficial to any side of the communities, whether it's LGBT, the teachers, the parents, etc. So I think we need to be a much more creative. I mean, I've even said that what we need possibly is a mini pride outside the schools, maybe have LGBT multi-faith community events as well. We need to be drawing on the community, bringing people in, having conversations in an informal manner to say that this is the way forward. We need to get away from the fact that, the religion tells us that homosexuality is haram, because there's a number of conversations that we're having with some of the parent protesters who time and time again, they keep repeating that in the Quran it says homosexuality is forbidden. But what we keep saying is that the interpretation of that particular story they refer to is open to interpretation. We try to take the positives from it, but they keep condemning us for it. So what I keep saying is we need conversations, and recently I've written an article about why I think that LGBT community needs to be reading the Quran. I'm not asking you to convert or revert. What I'm asking you to do is maybe just develop a better understanding of the Quran, so that if you are going to challenge religious homophobia, you're better equipped, you've got the knowledge to be saying, actually, I think you've got it wrong. And I think in terms of moving forward, we do have to be mindful of our own personal well-being, especially mental health. And I know Andrew and the rest of the panel here, we at some point have felt really stressed out, burnt out, but we constantly think the reason why we are challenging this time and time again is because we're not only helping our generation, but the generations that are coming beneath us, and they'll be in front of us as well. So that's what I keep thinking about, is the children and how it benefits children to keep having dialogue and communicating.
So I just wanted to add about this fanfare that's happening outside schools at the moment. I don't think anybody should be there. I don't think journalists should be reporting there. I don't think we should be counter-protesting there. No disrespect to anyone. I don't think anybody should be making films there either. Because all we're doing then is giving a platform to the protesters. And one thing I want to make quite clear, there's a small minority that are instigating these protests. And if you're seeing it on a day-to-day basis, some of us are living through this, you see the same people. It's the same family and their friends. And on a Friday, they'll just go to mosque and you'll see all the patriarchy turn up, but they're not there on the other days. So SEEDS, which stands for Supporting the Education of Equality and Diversity, which I'm the co-chair of, we're the only group that have been working towards unity, and I personally have rang people across the UK when I see on Twitter they're going to do a counter-protest. I don't know if Sam Wise is here today, but Sam Wise was one of them. We're good friends now. People are really angry, but people who aren't from my community also need to understand their privilege as well. So, if you're going to stand outside school gates telling parents who are already quite deprived how to teach their kids or how to educate the kids, well, who are you? Who the fuck are you to tell them? Okay, I can say that because I'm from that community, but I'm not going to go and do it outside a school gate. So I don't think anybody should be counter-protesting. We need to be the better people. And actually, I think we have been up until now. So no counter-protests. And what was it? Was that the main question?
Yeah. In relation
there
to
you go.
And Ferhan, is there anything you want to add to that?
Yes, well, I mean, I am one of the people that have actually gone to the school. I don't belong to that particular community, I've very rarely been to Birmingham. I have made videos and made some videos outside of the school interviewing the protesters. to challenge them on their views, not give them a platform. I've been very careful not to give them a platform. And it's quite funny that the family you speak specifically of, Shaquille, for example, I don't really want to give him a platform, and actually he had nothing to say, but he was very indignant. He got very abusive towards me because I didn't give him a video. So whilst I agree with you that it's important to realise and recognise that this is a community in pain, and they should, there should be a local effort to heal the community as well, and not have such a media circus around it. I do also think that people like myself, I would defend my work, because I would say that I have this opportunity, this platform, and yes, this privilege to be able to go to the community, ask some questions and challenge them, and then leave again and not have to deal, unfortunately, with what people that actually live in the community, like people in the street, what they have to deal with, which is actually the toxicity of the protests within their community. I don't have to live within that. I'm lucky in that I can just simply leave and go back to where I live. So I do take your point that it's important to recognise that not to do it constantly, but I think that there is a role that people from the outside of that community can play, specifically on the street. I've spoken to people that live on the street now. Anderton Park School is actually on a cul-de-sac, and of course it's got neighbours. The school has neighbours, so I've spoken to some of the neighbours as well, and they are the ones probably the most affected by this, because they literally have this protest going on their street. They have to encounter it every single day as they leave their home, their safe space. And of course, we're not even thinking about the children that go to the school. They face this toxicity every time they leave the school gates, and it's unfair on them to have to deal with that.
Saima, you had a...
So just before I go into the protests, outside schools, there's two schools, so I don't know if everyone knows the difference. So Parkfield School is where Andrew is, and Anderton Park is where Sarah Hewitt Clarkson is the head teacher, and it's a bit more volatile there. So that's what he was talking about, not Parkfield. In response to going to the schools, what I also want to say is, like I've said already, these are deprived communities. They're not media trained, and actually, on the back of in my opinion, an unethical call that was made to a parent on Friday, there was this big news article, well, quite a few news articles, that parents were protesting on Monday outside Andrew's school, which I was really confused with, because I've been talking with some of the parents, and the one thing we've managed to do at Parkfield is disassociate with the people who started protesting at Parkfield and then moved on to Anderton Park when they stopped protesting and went into negotiation, which now we're at the end of that consultation period. But these people aren't media trained. They don't know what to say, and their emotions get the better of them. So I think actually it's really unethical to interview anyone in my community when they're not media trained. If we want to interview them, then they can get representatives. But we are in conversations with the school and parents as well, and that's all I want to say.
I mean, the saying is, united we stand and divided we fall. And Khakan, what does the future hold?
I think what we need to do is just keep having these conversations. We really, really can't stop. I mean, we've just celebrated, we're here today, UK Black Pride. Yesterday was Pride in London. It's the month celebrating Stonewall and everything else. And we have to remember our histories. We have to remember why we were fighting in the first place, and about equality and liberty and freedoms that we have. And I think to move forward, we need to remind the people. I'm a bit frightened now. We need to remind people as to what we are here for. We also have to remind ourselves that in terms of our rights, in terms of the Equality Act, we've only gained rights in the last 16 years. It was only in 2003 that Section 28 was abolished. So in terms of history of the world, in the UK, we've only been visible, per se, in the last 16 years. And in order to move forward, we need to have these conversations to say that we are human beings first and foremost. It doesn't matter about your faith, it doesn't matter about your culture or your race or anything else. It's about being human, and we are trying to have dialogues and interactions with the parents and some of the protesters, and it's really difficult to have that conversation, because for me, I'm either they allege that I'm either Islamophobic, or when I'm trying to support the Muslim community, I'm told that I'm homophobic. So like Saima was saying, that we're caught in the middle, and what we want to say is that really we need to be moving forward and continue to educate the children as best as we can, whether it's through 3 or 4 books that Andrew has brought forward, or it's through conversations that the teachers are having with the children. I think what Sarah is doing over at Anderton is a remarkable achievement. She's resolute, she's resilient, and she maintains her strength. And everybody at some point are impacted on their mental health. But I think having those conversations, we really need to move forward on that.
Of again, a defense of my work going to interview the parents. These parents, Shaquille, for example, the protesters, they say that we have a right to protest, we have the freedom to speak. This is a country where we are guaranteed the freedom to speak. We should feel freely able to speak. So my response would be, if you're going to protest, particularly outside of school where children go, you're opening yourself up to a dialogue. So the media training, you shouldn't really come into it. If you're exercising your right to free speech, you're also, there's a flip side to that where you will be challenged on and scrutinized on your views if you're going to make such a big noise about that. And I recognize that these they are coming from deprived communities, and I think that we should be very cognizant of that and their unique needs, which is why I would never personally challenge them to the extent of saying you're wrong and whatever. It's a case of, well, why do you think this? What would you be willing to open your heart, your mind to another perspective? And really, I think that's been my methodology anyway. I think it's really important that you try to meet this community in the middle, because yes, they are marginalized as Muslims, as people belonging to a deprived community. So it's very important to recognize that, and they deal with racism, which we understand, and it's the people that are on the bottom rung of the ladder that experience racism the most, actually, I think, because there's an economic aspect to it as well. So I would say, moving forward, I think we need to have love in our hearts and really open up dialogue and be able to trust each other more.
So,
Can you ask the question again? Sorry.
what does the future hold?
So I think for me, with the conversations I'm personally having with my community, is the fact of talking about their future of their children, because we can't tell somebody that their faith is wrong or right. They've got their faith, right? They're entitled to have their opinion. So I don't think we should ever get into the theological debate. Unless you're an imam, you really are not qualified to talk on the details of the religion. I've lost my chain of thought. So the way I'm going to approach it now with parents is what we need to talk about is the employability of these kids, because these are working class families who are trying to send their kids to school to do better. I know, because I was one of them. I wouldn't have gone to university if it wasn't for my local LEA, and my mum pushed me. I wasn't allowed to go to my local school because she wanted, even though it just went like half a mile away, but it was more diverse, and she didn't want me to stay in the mixed communities. But what we need to tell these parents is the employability of their kids. How will their kids stand in society? We need to build kids or future leaders who are going to stand tall in society, who will be given positions of power, who can change the world. But they're not going to do that if they're bigoted. They can have their faith, but they have to absolutely embrace equality and modern Britain and all the families that live in the UK. And that's why No Outsiders is so great.
Andy?
I feel very confident about the future. We know how this is going to end, don't we? It's going to end with all schools doing this kind of work. Maybe not No Outsiders, but work like it, because we're not going backwards, are we, into 1990? We're going forwards, and we know how it's going to end. We have to get through this bit first, and I think that what the protests demonstrate is how important this work is. I love working at Parkfield School, and I'm absolutely committed to working with my parent community, to get this right, because we got it right before. And the kids aren't frightened of No Outsiders. The kids are very happy to be in a school where they know that they belong, and it doesn't matter who you are or what skin you have or the language or your disability. You belong in our school. No one is left out. all children understand what that means. All children understand, what it means to be left out, and no one wants to be left out. So this works really well. So I'm confident that the future is going to be good, but I'm not complacent. What this has taught me the last 6 months is not to be complacent and to not rest on my laurels, and just to keep working forward. And I just want to thank these three, who have been really good, a good source of support for me. I could not have carried on my own, and I look forward to working with people in the future.
We've got an opportunity for some questions and answers. Does anybody have any questions?
It was an absolute honour to meet you today. I just wanted to ask, if it's not too personal, were you an out person at school as well beforehand? And how did the parents respond to that?
Yeah, well, I was out. I came out in 2000. Yeah. Okay. So I went to the school in 2014, and I started No Outsiders in 2014 September, and I again came out to the school in December of 2015. So we did No Outsiders for a whole year. And the whole point is basically, you prepare children for people being different, and then you come out and say, oh, by the way, I'm gay as well. And it went fantastic, and there was no...
So that's something to build on, really, isn't it? Because those same parents did not protest.
Yeah, there was no protest.
Kind of like get a, praise for that, because that's progress, isn't it? They didn't stay.
Yes, there was never any protest about me coming out. I wear a rainbow lanyard in school to be visible. I started wearing rainbow socks. It's about being visible, and there's never been any protest at all. It's all happened in the last 6 months, and I know why it's happened. It's happened because of fears about sex education, and it's about people being whipped up, into panic about what sex education is. And there's nothing in No Outsiders about sex education. It's not. It's about community cohesion, British values, wherever they are. It's about preparing life in modern Britain.
And the last thing is, how much of a compromise did you have to make when you rewrote it for Parkfield?
Parkfield, yeah.
If you had to make a compromise at all?
Yeah, I don't feel I've compromised. I feel like I've worked with the parents to find a solution, because what I felt we couldn't do is just dig our heels in and say, no, tough, we're doing it, we're carrying on. I think it was wrong to I felt that was the wrong thing to do, and the school did as well. So that's why we paused No Outsiders, and it's very hard to pause our equality work for 5 months. But I feel like it was the right thing to do, because it shows that we are respectful, we're working together, and we have worked with our parents for 5 months. So in that 5 months, I rewrote No Outsiders, but I didn't make it any less LGBT or any more LGBT. I just, moved some books around, and we talked about the politics of using the word celebrate a bit as well, which is it's an interesting thing to talk about. So I talked about, am I asking Muslim children to celebrate me being gay? I don't think I am, but actually maybe it's about tolerating and accepting rather than celebrating. You don't have to celebrate me being gay if you're uncomfortable. I'm not going to ask any parent to come on gay pride. But I want acceptance, so it's about maybe stepping down from that celebrating a bit, just work. In future I want to celebrate, but maybe we're not quite there yet, so let's accept and tolerate for a bit. And I think it's just about that kind of thing, just having that debate and that open discussion about being realistic about where we are. I can't change the world overnight, it's been difficult, so this is where we are. But I'll finish on one little story. When we walked in Gay Pride, and we walked together in Gay Pride, and we led the Pride Parade. And I was a bit nervous on the week after Pride about maybe parent reactions. I thought I might get a bit of, I was nervous about reactions, what's the reaction going to be. So I'm on the playground saying, morning, morning, as I always do in the morning. And I only had one person mention Pride. It was a woman who came up to me and said, Mr. Moffat, we were there in the crowd, and we were shouting, Mr. Moffat, Mr. Moffat, Mr. Moffat. And she didn't wave back, you didn't see us, it was too noisy. She said, it was my first It was my first Pride and we absolutely loved it. Now that's changing the world, isn't it? Because we had a Muslim mum with her 2 Muslim kids coming to Birmingham Pride for the first time. You know, that's wonderful. That's changing the world. And for me, that's the way forward, isn't it? It's just little by little, you know, we will get there. It's just like a bit longer than I thought it was going to.
Thanks so much.
Any other questions to any other members of the panel?
Do you want to come over and grab the mic?
You can hear me from back here. So just a quick question that might be too big to really answer, but how do organisations who work in the same spaces that are viewed as maybe primarily Caucasians support the BAME and the faith-based communities without being seen to talk over those communities?
So how can non-faith, non-BAME queer groups support queer, non-Caucasian?
Recruit people of colour to help you. You know, I'm getting sick to the teeth with just everything, with the lack of representation. I worked in TV myself, and when I look at my circles, still very white, still very middle class, but we exist. There's a lot of intelligent people of colour, a lot of creative people of colour. So just call on us. There's loads of people in the audience. So I take offence from that question as well, because why would you ask that question? Why would you not go to a person of colour? So no disrespect to you personally, but generally as a society, everyone needs to understand their privilege, and people of colour shouldn't be a second thought. We exist and we should be there. So, you know, if you're trying to, for example, if you're a charity with a board, for example, well, what's the diversity ratio in your on your board? So in Seeds, I didn't want to become co-chair, but I only did it because I was afraid that a racist would become in charge, and I fought really, really hard to have 50-50 proportional representation, and we got that. But I shouldn't be doing all that work. It's not. I'm a person of colour, but it's not my world to save. It's everyone's world to save.
We don't have time. One last question from the lady here.
Okay, thank you. Thanks everyone. Andrew, you said that there's no going back, we can only go forwards, but I mean the reality is that we are seeing rights being removed in other countries, in Europe, we're seeing changes in America, in the USA rather, and I suppose my question is that actually there is a kind of polarisation increasingly and an entrenching of views and some unholy alliances as well between, say, people who want to exclude trans people and, you know, extreme religious groups, or between the extreme right who are racist and LGBTQ, you know. So actually with social media, I think that there is a sort of polarisation, and we could go back if politics becomes, you know, in some way kind of corrupted by that. And so I suppose, yeah, that's my question is, how can we all become a bit more sophisticated, culturally competent around this? Because I think otherwise things could become more polarised.
I'm going to ask Andy to first of all answer that, but also to provide a takeaway in relation to what people should go away with following this panel. Andy first.
Yeah, that's exactly why I wrote No Outsiders. I've been told that I've got an agenda, and I do have an agenda. It's community cohesion. That's my agenda, absolutely. You know, I can't control what children are hearing outside the school gates, but I absolutely can control what they're hearing inside the school gates. And what they're hearing inside the school gates is that diversity is absolutely brilliant. Diversity is wonderful, and isn't it fantastic that we have different skin, different religion, blah blah blah. You know, so I'm winning hearts and minds about being louder than those other voices outside. So my answer is resources like No Outsiders starting in primary schools.
I just think going forward, everyone here should be aiming to get into a position of power, especially if you're a person of colour. The only way we're going to change society is if we're actually part of the decision making. So you can't do anything, and in my personal career, I've worked really hard to get into a position of power, so then I can challenge things from the front. But you all need to do that. It's really important. Any young people, you know, it'd be great to see you as Prime Minister one day, and that is my final thought.
Yes, I think there's some really key terms here that we should become familiar with. One of those is something promoted by Kimberly Crenshaw, intersectionality. So you talked about how there's different types of oppression and different groups within groups. Now, we need to understand that you're not just black. You're not just a person of color. You're not just gay. You can be intersections of those. You can be less able-bodied. You can be a woman and experience misogyny as well as being black, misogynoir. So we need to be very much more aware of terms like that. And I think it shouldn't just be the people that actually are experiencing those intersectionalities that learn about those. Everyone should be learning about this. It takes a lot of emotional labor to explain this to people that are in more privileged positions. So I would mention also white fragility, which is a concept where actually there's a limited willingness to actually listen to racism. It's like, well, if you don't like listening to it, try experiencing it. That's it's hard to experience it. So if you're just listening to this argument, that's enough. And I would say, just recognize that we're not getting paid to sort of educate you on our intersectionalities. And within minority groups, don't assume that everyone's an angel. Like, we have TERFs, we have lesbians and gays that are transphobic within our community. We have white gay men that are racist towards POC gay men. We have those, and it's frankly terrible that that is the case. But let's start to and also remember that when we empower ourselves, when you empower yourself or you empower others, that doesn't mean you're disempowering yourself. That's my last thought.
I don't know if my electromagnetic vibes are going to disrupt it. I would say what you need to do first of all is educate and empower yourself, but at the same time use your tools that you have in your hand, which is social media. Everybody here, put your hand up if you've got a smartphone. Nearly everybody has a smartphone. Use that as well to show solidarity with people like Andy, No Outsiders. It shows that you understand it, celebrate it, educate, and communicate more than anything. Communicate with your neighbours in the community about what this means to you and the future generations. Communicate with the teachers, the schools, your work colleagues. Constantly talk about it. Like for me at work, I talk about being LGBT to the point where my heterosexual colleagues, they're fed up of it. But I have to do it because it usualises that conversation. We have to make our lives, our livelihood, our identities, we have to make it everyday part and parcel of who we are, so that everywhere there is representation within the media, within the organisations that you talk about, within the academic institutions, everywhere, because we are here, we are queer, and we will always be here. We've been here since the millennia, and we must not forget that the protests that occurred back in 1969 with Stonewall was a trans person of colour. And here we are. I really, really want a gay Asian revolution. I don't want the brick throwing or anything, but I do believe that for people of colour, we need some kind of revolution. I want people to stand up and say, I am part of the LGBT community. I have a voice. My group is called Finding a Voice. I want people to unmute their voices and talk about who they are, what it means to them, what it means to the children. Talk about having families, talk about having children. We constantly are being faced by saying, you're gay and it doesn't matter, or gay and white people, it's okay, it's Western ideology. But no, being gay, LGBT is also from the South Asian continent, from Africa, from other parts of the world where there are non-white individuals. We have been here since the millennia, and we celebrate it in our culture, in our art, in our paintings, in our drawings, in our songs and music, whatever shape or form that you take. How many people here have got an interest outside of their work, whether it's baking, photography, gardening? Introduce LGBT ethics into that work. Express yourself, explore yourself, make yourself heard in any shape or form. Use the talents, which is yourself, your resources, make it come from the heart and make it come from the gut as well. Keep going, keep being strong, and keep being yourselves. Thank you.
And on that note, I'd like to thank Khakan Qureshi, Ferhan Khan, Saimarazzaq and Andy Moffat for contributing for this UK Black Pride No Outsiders panel. If I can have a round of applause for all the panel. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much. That was so enlightening again, thank you. We have another round of applause for our panellists, thank you.